Hey guys, welcome back to day 7 of our OSINT series. Today's episode is going to be very deep, so please don't skip any part of this episode because every step we're going to cover can be useful during an OSINT investigation. Today we're going to start our episode with people search. So what exactly is a people search engine? A people search engine is a type of service or website that collects information from multiple publicly available sources and presents it in one place. These services can aggregate information from different sources such as public records, online directories, social media platforms, websites, and other publicly accessible datasets. Because they combine information from multiple sources, some of these services can contain a surprisingly large amount of data. Originally, many of these services were heavily focused on US-based information and public records. But as the internet continued to grow and more online services appeared, such as social media platforms, online directories, dating websites, and other digital services, the amount of publicly available information also increased. As a result, people search services continued to expand their databases and improve the ways they organize and present this information. However, before we move forward and start learning these techniques step by step, there are a few important things you need to keep in mind when using these websites. First, be careful with advertisements. You are going to see a lot of advertisements on some of these websites. Don't randomly click on advertisements while you're conducting an investigation. Apart from being distracting, advertisements can sometimes lead you away from the actual service you're trying to use. So always pay attention to what you're clicking. Second, collect the information you find. Another important rule in OSINT is data is data. If you find relevant information during an investigation, collect and document it properly. You may not need a particular piece of information immediately, but it could become useful later when you start connecting different pieces of information together. This is one of the fundamental ideas behind OSINT. One individual piece of information may look insignificant, but multiple pieces of information can become meaningful when they are connected and verified. So, whenever you find something relevant, document it and keep track of where it came from. And finally, don't spend money unnecessarily on these services. Many people search websites use free searches to attract users and then put additional information behind a paid subscription or payment screen. For this series, we'll focus on techniques and resources that can be used for learning OSINT without encouraging unnecessary spending. And again, don't click on random advertisements just because they appear alongside your search results. So, with these basic rules in mind, let's start today's episode and begin exploring people search techniques step by step. First tool, Thatsthem. Now let's move on to our first people search tool. The first tool we're going to explore is Thatsthem.com. It is a powerful people search service that can search for publicly available information using identifiers such as a person's first name, last name, phone number, email address, or address. However, even when a tool gives you a result, you should always verify the information independently. A search result is only a lead until you confirm that the information actually belongs to the person you're investigating. How does it work? One of the most useful concepts here is pivoting. In OSINT, pivoting means taking one piece of information you already have and using it to discover additional related information. For example, you might start with a name. That name could lead you to a possible phone number or address. You can then use that new information as another pivot and continue expanding your investigation. This is how different pieces of information can gradually be connected into a larger picture. The service works by aggregating information from different publicly available sources and presenting potentially related information together. So instead of manually searching every source individually, a people search service can help you discover possible connections more quickly. But remember, aggregation does not automatically mean accuracy. Different people can have the same name, phone numbers can change ownership, and databases can contain outdated or incorrect information. That's why verification is still an essential part of the OSINT process. So let's check one example. Practical demonstration. Open your browser and type Thatsthem.com. Once the website opens, you'll see different search options. Depending on what information you already have, you can search using different types of identifiers. For example, you may be able to enter a first name, a last name, a phone number, an email address, an address. The important thing here is to start with the information you already have and then use the results to pivot into other publicly available information. So let's enter our example and see what kind of results the service provides. Now let's type the name John. As you can see, the site has generated quite a few results, but there's a catch. The main information is hidden. To bypass this, we are going to try a few neat tricks. First, press F12 or right-click anywhere on the page and select View Page Source. Now press Ctrl+F to open the search bar. I'll copy a piece of visible text from the page and paste it here, then hit Enter. Notice how you can easily highlight specific filters to locate what you need. Now for the next trick. If you don't find the hidden info there, right-click directly on the blurred content and choose Inspect. On the right-hand panel, use the filter bar to search for display. Scroll down until you spot a property set to inline block, or inherit, and simply change it to initial. Boom! The hidden details are now fully visible. More people search websites. There are several other people search websites that work in a similar way, and some of them can also be quite powerful for OSINT research. For example, AdvanceBackgroundCheck, Interiors, Spokeo. These services may provide different types of publicly available information depending on the website, the location, and the information available in their databases. However, remember that different services can have different coverage and accuracy. So don't rely on a single website or assume that every result is correct. Always cross-check important information with independent public sources before considering it a confirmed finding. And there are several other useful people search websites as well. I'll provide the additional websites and resources on our website so you can explore them and practice these techniques yourself. The important thing is not just knowing the names of these tools, it's understanding when to use them, how to pivot between different identifiers, and how to verify the information they provide. Depth analysis, telephone number investigation. Now let's move into a deeper analysis section. From here, we're going to start discussing techniques such as telephone number investigation and number tracing. Telephone number investigation can be divided into several steps, and the first step is carrier information. Before doing anything else, we need to understand what type of number we're dealing with. For example, we want to determine which carrier or service is associated with the number. Is it a traditional mobile or landline number? Is it a VoIP number? What provider is operating the number? This is important because the type of number can tell us a lot about how it is being provided and what kind of information may be available for further investigation. What is VoIP? VoIP stands for Voice over Internet Protocol. Instead of sending voice through a traditional telephone network, VoIP uses an internet connection to transmit voice and, in many cases, video. There are different types of VoIP services. One distinction you'll commonly encounter is between fixed VoIP and non-fixed VoIP. A fixed VoIP number is generally associated with a particular physical location, such as a home or office. Because it can be associated with a physical service location and billing information, there may be additional information available to investigators through legitimate records or service provider processes. The second type is non-fixed VoIP. These numbers are generally not tied to a traditional physical location in the same way. They can be easier to obtain and use remotely, which can make attribution more difficult. However, one important correction here: a VPN does not automatically make a VoIP user untraceable. A VPN can hide the user's direct IP address from some services, but attribution can involve many other sources of information, such as account records, authentication data, payment information, provider logs, device information, and other legally accessible records. So, during an investigation, we should never assume that a VPN alone explains or prevents attribution. How does a traditional phone call work? Now let's understand the technical difference. A traditional telephone service can operate through the PSTN, which stands for Public Switch Telephone Network. For mobile communication, cellular networks use radio communication between the phone and nearby cellular infrastructure, which then connects the call through the wider telephone network. VoIP works differently. When user A calls user B using a VoIP service, the voice captured by the microphone is converted from an analog audio signal into digital data. That digital information can then be divided into smaller pieces and transmitted across an IP network as packets. There are several protocols involved in this process. One important protocol is SIP. Session Initiation Protocol (SIP) is used for signaling and session management. In simple terms, it helps establish, modify, and terminate communication sessions. So when a VoIP call starts, SIP can be involved in the process of setting up the communication between the endpoints. The second important protocol is RTP. Real-Time Transport Protocol (RTP) is commonly used to carry real-time audio and video media. So while SIP is primarily concerned with managing the communication session, RTP carries the actual real-time media. What happens to the voice? Let's simplify the complete process. When user A speaks, analog voice, digital data, packets, IP network, receiver. The packets travel through the network toward the receiving side. When they reach user B's device, the packets are processed and reassembled into a continuous media stream, which is then converted back into audio that the receiver can hear. So the basic concept looks like this: voice, digital conversion, packetization, network transmission, reassembly, audio. That's the fundamental idea behind internet-based voice communication. Identifying a VoIP number during investigation. Now, when you're investigating a telephone number, one useful step is checking its carrier or service provider information. Depending on the lookup service and the number, you may see providers such as Google Voice, Twilio, or other telecommunications and VoIP providers. If the carrier information indicates a service such as Google Voice or Twilio, that can be a strong indicator that the number is associated with a VoIP or internet-based telecommunications service. But again, don't treat the carrier name alone as proof of who is using the number. It tells us about the service or provider associated with the number, not necessarily the real-world identity of the person using it. And this is exactly why carrier identification is our first step. Once we understand what type of number we're dealing with, we can decide what other publicly available information and investigative techniques are relevant. So with that foundation in place, let's start exploring this field of telephone number investigation. Carrier investigation, first step in telephone number OSINT. So the first step in telephone number investigation is carrier investigation. Before we try to identify anything else, we first need to understand what type of number we're dealing with and which telecommunications provider or service is associated with it. When you investigate the available information for a target number, a carrier lookup may provide details such as the carrier or service provider, number type, validity information, and dates associated with the number depending on the service and the data available. This information can help us build our initial picture of the number. So let's check this practically. There are many different tools and services available online for carrier and reverse number lookups, but for this demonstration, I'm going to try just one. The first service is Whocalled. This is a service that provides reverse phone number lookup functionality. So let's try an example. Practical demonstration, open your browser and type whocalled.com. Once the website loads, you'll see a number of examples on the page. I'm going to use one of those numbers for this demonstration. I'll simply copy the number and now I'll paste it into the input field. Let's run the search. As you can see, the service has returned some results. Now let's click on one of the results to examine the available information. Here, depending on the number and the information available in the service's database, we may see details such as company or service name, carrier, number type, location or region information, other available details associated with the number. This is exactly why carrier investigation is an important first step. We're not immediately trying to identify the person behind the number. First, we're trying to understand the number itself. Is it a mobile number? Is it a landline? Is it associated with a VoIP provider? Which carrier or telecommunications service is handling it? Once we understand those details, we can decide what our next investigative step should be. Other carrier investigation tools, there are many other services and CLI tools that can be used for similar research. For example, you may come across services or APIs such as Twilio OpenCam caller rate service, and there are also command line tools that can be useful for telephone number OSINT. One example is PhoneInfoga. If you want to install PhoneInfoga, open your browser and go to its GitHub repository. https://git.com/downdev PhoneInfoga, clone the repository, and then install its required dependencies according to the project's documentation. Once the installation is complete, we can use PhoneInfoga as another tool for researching publicly available information associated with a telephone number. And remember, these tools don't magically reveal someone's complete identity. They provide leads and metadata, which we then need to verify and connect with other independent sources. That's the mindset you should maintain throughout an OSINT investigation. Don't trust a single result. Build and verify the evidence step by step. And that's where we're going to wrap up today's episode. Today, we started going deeper into telephone number investigation, beginning with one of the most important steps, carrier investigation. We learned how to identify the type of number we're dealing with, understand the difference between traditional telephone services and VoIP, and use reverse lookup services to collect useful information about a number. But remember, finding information is only the beginning of an OSINT investigation. The real skill is knowing how to connect different pieces of information, verify them through independent sources, and turn those individual findings into a reliable investigation. And this was just the first step. There are still many more techniques we need to explore when it comes to telephone number OSINT, and we'll continue building on this in the upcoming episodes. If you found this episode useful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the topics or techniques you want me to cover next. A lot of research goes into finding, testing, and presenting these techniques in a practical way, so your support genuinely helps me continue this series. I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll take our investigation even further. Stay curious, stay analytical, verify everything, and always use OSINT responsibly.